Immortality is but an apple cooling a scorched palm, and the universe a burden impossible to hold and forbidden to cast aside. Freedom can intoxicate more deeply than wine, and sometimes the only path to it is a lie. This time everything was different. For the 11th time I stepped beyond the human pale to seize knowledge no mortal has the right to possess. The shadow of the Tiryns' threshold is always cold. It doesn't come from the sun. It comes from the fear that has soaked into the stone. Eurystheus doesn't look me in the eye. He stares at my sandals, stained with the red clay of Argolis, his voice a rustle of dry scales. The 11th time. This time he didn't want the blood of a monster or the cleaning of a stable. He wanted a dream, impossible and hollow. "Bring me the apples of the Hesperides," he hissed, a glint of sickly greed in his eyes. Apples, gold that grants eternity. These were no mere fruits. They were a wedding gift from Gaia herself to Hera, golden spheres grown on a tree at the edge of night. There, where the sky doesn't just soar, but leans heavily upon the shoulders of a titan. Every apple is sunlight frozen in time. They say whoever bites into that skin will forget the frailty of muscle and the brittleness of bone. Eurystheus, trembling in his own insignificance, wanted to buy himself immortality with my hands. He was looking for a way to be rid of me, sending me to a place from which even gods do not return. No mortal, no demigod, knew the path to the garden. Even the dwellers of Olympus lost themselves in the mists of the west, where existence ends. How many times can you die before it becomes a habit? The road is not measured in miles. It is the dirt under the fingernails and the salt on the lips. Thessaly breathes of rot, Epirus of sharp stones that cut the soles of the feet. I ask the way, but people hide their faces in their hands. Their fear is sticky, like tar. They don't know where the West is. They only know that the sun dies there every evening in a puddle of its own blood. The river Eridanus. I stood with my bare feet sunk in the silt, feeling the river muck swallow my sandals. The water was cold enough to make the teeth ache. They didn't emerge from the foam. They seeped through the roots of old willows, as if wept by the river itself. Nymphs, daughters of Zeus and Themis, skin the color of river dace, hair a tangle of weeds clutching dead minnows. Their fingers, cold and thin as reeds, brushed my scars. They knew why I was here. In these lands every stone knew of Eurystheus's madness. "Nereus," whispered the eldest, her face a blurred mask of wet clay. It wasn't a name. It was a sentence. Only the old man of the sea could find the trail through the mists of the west. I found him on a desolate shore. He was sleeping, encrusted with shells like a corpse washed up for the crabs. The moment my fingers locked around his throat, the god began to thrash, blurring his own form. He didn't want to yield the secret. He wanted to vanish, to become anything other than a captive. First, slick scales, a monstrous fish struggling in my arms, wrenching my joints with wet thrusts of its tail. Then, a savage roar. In my embrace, a frenzied lioness suddenly materialized, her maw full of jagged fangs, snapped inches from my face. The lion skin on my own shoulders recognized the living flesh. Claws tear at my forearms. I feel the hot blood run down my ribs. Do not let go. Then, fire. The old man erupted, searing my skin. Real, yellow, spiteful fire. The hair on my arms crackles. The smell of scorched meat fills my nostrils. The ringing in my ears becomes unbearable, like 1,000 cicadas screaming at once. Water. Now he became a rushing torrent, trying to flow through my fingers. My palms close on emptiness, but I hold the very essence of this water, the very idea of fluidity, until my muscles vibrate with exhaustion. My will was harder than the rocks. Squeeze, harder still, until the bones begin to groan. He broke. His body took on human form again, a heavy-breathing old man who accepted defeat. Go to the edge of Libya, the god wheezed, there where the sun plunges into the ocean. Libya is a yellow death. The sun strikes the crown of the head like a blacksmith's hammer. Every breath is a gulp of scorched sand. The desert tried to suck the moisture from my body, and the sandstorms lashed my face. Antaeus. He wasn't a man. He was an outgrowth on the body of the earth, a son of Poseidon and Gaia. His laugh was a mountain landslide. His law was simple. Every traveler had to wrestle him to the death. A giant, drunk on his own power, he wanted to build a temple to his father out of human skulls, and he was missing only mine, the skull of a son of Zeus. When we locked together, I felt I wasn't fighting a man, but a mountain. The fight was brutal. 3 times I threw him to the ground, breaking his ribs. I heard the dry snap, but the moment his skin touched the sand, he surged back up, growing larger. His skin soaked up the strength of Mother Earth like a dry sponge drinks water. Wounds closed before my eyes. Muscles swelled with new power every time he fell into her embrace. Fatigue came suddenly. My arms grew heavy like the columns of a temple. Antaeus pressed in, his breath smelling of raw earth and the grave. If he falls, I lose. I shifted my tactic. I locked my arms around his waist and lifted. It wasn't just an effort, it was a tearing of my own flesh. I hoisted his massive body high into the air, severing his connection to the earth. He thrashed like a fish on a hook, pleading, wheezing, vainly trying to reach his toes toward the yellow sand that offered salvation. I held him, unflinching, tightening my iron grip until the life left him. The earth could not help her son while he hung in nothingness. When I cast aside his lifeless carcass, it fell with the weight of dead stone. The Caucasus, a place where the stone has learned to scream. The stench of torn flesh and ancient suffering hung in the air like fog. I saw Prometheus from a distance, a colossal shadow chained to the rock, paying daily for the fire. And the eagle, its wings flapped like wet canvas hitting stone. The bird descended to peck at the liver that had already grown back overnight. It was an eternal cycle of hell. When the arrow broke that cycle, the eagle fell. When the club shattered the chains, Prometheus did not fall to his knees. He slowly raised his head, and for the first time I felt a gaze that weighed more than the mountains of Epirus. In his eyes, not gratitude, but a knowledge of all that was and all that is to be. Your strength, Prometheus's voice sounded like the rustle of dry leaves, yet it held the power of a wind that grinds mountains. Your strength is a curse, son of Zeus. Zeus gave it to you so you would do the bidding of petty kings until it destroys you. He looked at my hands covered in the black blood of the eagle. I felt that blood burn my skin like acid. You have come for the apples of the Hesperides. The Titan shuddered, and a black fluid leaked from his torn muscles. You think you will kill Ladon? The immortal dragon that never sleeps senses a warrior from 1,000 paces. Your rage is but a beacon for him. It shows him where you are. I gritted my teeth. My will was harder than the rocks, but the Titan's words cut through it like a blade. Go to Atlas. Prometheus stared into the void of the west. Freedom. It is what all desire. Go and give him a taste of that freedom. Let Atlas pluck the apples. Only he who holds the sky can pass the dragon, for he is part of that sky. I took this as truth. Soon I heard a rumble like eternal thunder. The edge of the world. Here the earth drops away into the boundless ocean. Atlas. His figure was more majestic than any mountain. Upon his shoulders lay the celestial sphere, vast, shimmering with stars, heavy as existence itself. The Titan's muscles quivered, his knees were driven into the bedrock, and his face was frozen in a mask of infinite pain. "I have come for the apples of the Hesperides," I shouted through the roar of the waves. Atlas looked at me from beneath the vault, in his eyes, envy for a mortal who can freely move his feet. "I will bring them," he boomed, a voice like a rock slide. "But who will hold the sky? The dragon is my enemy, but my daughters will give the apples to me. Only the universe must not fall to the earth." Remembering the words of Prometheus, I stepped forward. "I will hold it." It is impossible to describe. I felt the eons-old stillness of the Titan flow into my veins, searing them to ash. The sensation that everything that exists, every star, every cloud, every gust of wind, is pressing personally against your spine. My feet sank into the earth up to the ankles. I felt my skull begin to compress, my bones emitting a dry crack. Every star, every surge of cosmic wind bore down on me. The sky was not light, it was dense, iron, merciless. Time vanished. Hours passed that felt like centuries. There was only breath. Short, ragged. Inhale, hold, exhale, don't fall. I became a living pillar of the world, realizing that the life of everyone now rested on my shoulders. I heard my vertebrae shifting, my tendons straining until they were like iron cables. Blood pulsed in my temples, sweat blinded my eyes. Atlas returned. 3 golden fruits shone in his hands, but there was no shame in his eyes. "Freedom is sweeter than apples," he thundered, and the sound of his voice nearly threw me into the abyss. "I myself will carry them to Mycenae. And you have proven you are worthy to bear this weight. Farewell, son of Zeus." I felt something salty flow from my mouth. My teeth were crumbling. The world narrowed to a single point. Don't let the sky fall right now. The plan was born not in my head, but in the instinct of a wounded beast. I had to make him believe I had surrendered. "Wait." My rasp was barely audible through the roar of the stars. "You speak the truth, Titan. Free." Atlas stopped. A minute of freedom had made him greedy for my words. I gulped the air, feeling the cosmic cold sear my lungs. Atlas stood beside me. He was light as a feather, and that lightness insulted me more than his betrayal. "I will stay." Every word cost me a torn muscle. "But the sphere, it cuts the bone. The lion skin, it's bunched up. Let me adjust it." I pretended my knee buckled. The sky above us shuddered. The stars swayed like spilled mercury. Atlas grew afraid. Not for me. He feared that this infinite weight would become his reality again before he could escape. "Only for a moment," Atlas growled. He laid the gold on the grass and offered his mighty shoulders once more. His hands, accustomed to this hell, automatically reached upward. The very moment the weight transferred to its owner, I collapsed to the ground. The world didn't just become light, it vanished. I didn't hear Atlas, didn't hear the ocean. Only the way the blood, finally breaking through the constricted veins, scorched my body from within. Every heartbeat echoed in my skull like a blacksmith's hammer. I don't know how long I lay in the dust. Minutes, centuries. I learned to breathe again, breath by breath, pushing the cosmic cold out of my lungs. When I finally could open my eyes, the gold of the apples in the grass seemed the only thing with any weight in this precarious world. I slowly picked up the apples. They were cold, incredibly cold, pleasantly cooling my scorched palms. "Forgive me, Atlas," I said, looking into the Titan's enraged eyes. "To each his own burden. You were created to hold the sky, and I, to follow the orders of kings, to atone for my own guilt." The way back was easier, though the gold in the bag weighed more than any metal. I passed the liberated Caucasus, the banks of the Nile, the sands of Libya where tyrants were no more. Eurystheus looked so small. When I entered and laid the apples on the table, the king fell to his knees. He couldn't even touch them. The divine radiance scorched his cowardly soul. It reminded him that true greatness is not in gold, but in the spirit. He ordered them taken away. I brought them as a gift to Athena. The wise goddess returned the apples to the garden of the Hesperides. Mortals have no place among eternity. The 11th time. I laid the gold on the table, but I felt no victory. My mind proved stronger than my bones, but it did not quench the ache in my joints. Now I know the truth. The sky is not light and it is not blue. It is nothing. A bottomless black void that is only waiting for a new pair of foolish shoulders. The garden of the Hesperides has vanished into the mist again. Ladon guards the fruits that brought happiness to no one. My palms still remember the cold of the stars. I do not want divinity. I simply want to close my eyes and no longer feel the gaze of eternity upon me.